Join the Council for the Model Aquatic Health Code, aka CMAC. CMAC is a member-driven organization that keeps the Model Aquatic Health Code sustainable, current, and complete. Your expertise is needed. Learn more at cmac.org. That's cmahc.org.
Hey everyone, it's Kelly with Talking Pools on Tuesdays with Kelly and Dan.
Hey everybody, happy February. I think this is February by the time you guys are going to hear this one. Rudy has been busting our balls, hasn't he?
I know.
He's like, hey, you know what? I got to do some editing and I'm going to be gone for a little bit. So I need you guys to put together 32 episodes before tomorrow.
To be honest, that's kind of how I felt at first. Because, okay, it's not that we don't try to be ahead, but we are nothing like Heather. She's always like a gazillion episodes ahead.
Yep.
We are usually like right on time, maybe an extra one.
Yeah.
And he's just like, hey, I'm leaving. Need to do this before I leave.
Yep.
And so me and Dan were like, on what, Monday, yes, because I had the kids.
Yeah.
We were like, okay, we got 2 out of the way. We're good for 2 weeks because,
right?
Dan's going to Atlantic City and we don't, when we go to these shows, we don't want to have to record while we're at these shows because we're too busy.
Right.
And we're like, we're on track. Oh no, last night we need 2 episodes from you.
Right.
By the end of the week.
You say Atlantic City. By the time our listeners hear this one, it's going to be Thanksgiving, and they're going to be like, Atlantic City, what are you talking about? No, we're not that far out. He didn't do that to us. He only needed a couple episodes, and we're glad to do it. We love doing this stuff and sharing whatever we're able to share with you. And
I look forward to it every week.
Yeah, it's fun for us. Hopefully, it's fun for you guys. Hopefully, you pick up something along the way, and we'd love if you would share things with us, either through the Talking Pools podcast group or emailing us at talkingpools@gmail.com or any other way you might get a hold of us. If you bump into us at Atlantic City weeks ago, wave in, what was that? Oh, Doctor Who traveled in the TARDIS, a time machine thing. You'd have to do that now because Atlantic City is behind us. But at any rate, this is part 3 of the Kelly and Dan electrical series.
Yes. So...
Rudy, insert electrical noise here. Sound effect. That's what I mean. Sound effect.
Do a sound effect so we can electrocute it.
Yeah.
But not to you. Okay.
So what is this part 3 on again?
We are doing NEC codes and letting them know, about licensing.
NEC, that's Northern Eastern Connecticut codes?
No. So this is the National Electrical Code. So This is the guidelines that the states, counties, cities, whatever, go by when they are making the regulations for making sure that people are safe.
Right.
Keep in mind, there are numerous volumes of this. And what I mean by that is you have, 2000, you probably have 1852. It's just the year that section or that code was revised.
Right.
Now, every state is different. Not all of them are on the same page. Like where I live in California, we're going off of 2017.
Oh, well, that's not too bad, though. And by the way, these codes are revisited on 3-year cycles. So, we got, 2017, then there was 2020, and now it's 2023. As of this year, a brand new version of it came out. Okay. Often there's not a lot that changes, but there can be. So it's a couple of things. It's good to, if you're able, find the changes every year, but it's more important, as Kelly said, that you're looking at what your local governing municipality, whatever that may be, might be a city, a county, a state, what they're using as their guideline Not that long ago, 5 or 6 years ago, a very upscale community in Chicago where almost everything is $2 million plus homes, was using the 1999 NEC code.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It was, it was, there were 2 stone tablets it was written on. No, it wasn't that bad, but it
Not
was
smoke signals.
Yeah, and try to find a copy of the 1999 NEC code to know exactly what it is you're supposed to be doing. That was crazy. They've since, I think they might be 2017 now, and actually it might have been 2017, no, 2018 that they adopted the 2017, but prior to that it was the 1999 for 20 years.
Wow.
They used the same code. But changes do occur. The one thing that we found in that as an after the fact, so part of the NEC code, we talked a couple episodes ago about equipotential bonding and the bonding of decks around a swimming pool. Well, when you do paver brick, the current codes for many years say that you need to have a bare number 8 solid copper wire that runs around the perimeter of the pool, a single wire. Underneath the paver brick, I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but it usually ends up being a couple inches into the either bedding sand or the base beneath the bedding sand under the paver brick. And that wire has to be a certain distance back from the edge of the pool, it has to be between this and this. And I'll have to look it up to see. I always have to, because my construction crews know it and they follow it and all that. But I want to say it's between 18 and 24 inches back or something like that. And that's the wire that's going to pick up your ladder anchors and hit your light niches if they're metal niches and all that kind of stuff. Well, we went ahead and got the bonding in, called for bonding inspection, and we failed. And the reason we failed was back in 1999, they required a 12-inch by 12-inch grid of solid number 8 copper wire 3 feet back from the inside edge of the pool. Now, if you've never priced out copper wire,
not cheap,
that becomes a shock.
100, what was it I was told the other day when I was like, I only need 10 feet. They're like, we only sell a roll of 100 feet and it's $400 and something.
Wow.
I'm like, I'm good.
That's crazy. Well, this added there. Well, and with this metal, this copper grid, the wires, you couldn't just take a single spool of wire and run it out and create your own 12-inch grid. The inner section of these wires had to be, I'm going to say, welded together. So essentially you had to buy a mat, like you would buy wire mesh to do a concrete deck, only that wire mesh isn't just steel wire, it's copper, solid 8 copper wire. Thousands of dollars for this backyard that one, we hadn't budgeted. And then of course we failed inspection. There were delays because we had to track down this wire. Who sells it anymore? It's been years since it's been required. It was a little bit of pain in the ass. And why? Because our staff goofed and didn't dig into all of the, cross their T's and dot their I's kind of crap. And
really,
make sure.
That can't be one of those where you're like, you should have known better, like 1999.
Well, yeah, and what's interesting?
You would think that you would want to go with the more current because of the revisions that are obviously being done for safety purposes.
And it's interesting that this is one of those cases too where a code was changed to become, I'll say, less stringent, right? Because studies and research that they've done have proved that this expensive 3-foot grid was not necessary, that a single wire in this certain distance provided the same protection as that whole grid did. So at any rate, to Kelly's point, know the code that you're dealing with, whether it's, again, your town, your
1999.
city, your country, whether it's 1999, whether
Your
it's
neighborhood.
2023, whatever the case is, and then understanding what's in that code. So that's also part of what we're going to be talking about today, right?
Yeah. It's good to know this stuff. Don't just think, there's a lot more to building pools than people sometimes think.
Building and also servicing, because we talked a couple of weeks ago about the bond wire running through the equipment. Yeah. And you go out and you change a pump or you change a motor, and is the bond wire attached to it when you're done, or was it attached when you got there, or is there a bond wire even in the equipment? And if there isn't, what do you do about it? These are all things that one example that I think I mentioned in that episode that we see a lot is where old ladder anchors need to be replaced in a concrete deck. So someone comes along with a concrete core bit and cores out where that anchor is, severing that bond wire and all the rest of it and putting a new anchor in. There are ways you can try to be careful to salvage that wire, reattach it to the new one. There are also many times that homeowners want to add a handrail where there isn't one, or a ladder where there isn't one, or sometimes a certain slide might have anchoring that has metal that requires bonding. And when that happens, how are you going to get that bond wire to it? What are you going to do? Well, we've developed a process, and again, as far as ladders and handrails, there are plastic anchors out there, a specific company that makes them, and they make a plastic, if you will, a resin rail and ladder that goes into it that does not require bonding because there's no metal to it. But that's aside from the norm. The anything metal you got bonded. So when we get into adding a second ladder to an existing pool or some other thing like that, we core drill into the deck where we're going to put our anchors, and then we take a concrete saw and we run a concrete saw from those holes straight back out to the yard. And a number 8 bare copper wire will drop into that slit that we made with the concrete saw. So, usually what we'll do is make a saw line between the two holes if it's a ladder we're putting in, let's say, and we'll drop the anchors in, bond wire attached to them. We'll run that bond wire from one to the other. We'll have a saw cut line straight back. If we're near an expansion joint, what we might do is run the saw cut to the expansion joint, run the saw right through that expansion joint again, just to clean it out, open it up, make sure that all the dirt and grime from the ears is out of the way. And then we drop that copper wire right into that slot. Once we get out to the yard, then we just slice the grass, cut through the landscape, and just bury that wire in the ground all the way back to the equipment pad and attach it to the bond wire at the equipment pad that's there. Mm-hmm. So we're keeping that continuous bond. Everything is still all attached. It's, as we said before, the bird on the wire effect, and it's all in one plane, if you will, in terms of the potential of electrical ground or whatever that the whole system has. So anyway, that's just one way that we do it. Some people will tear out whole sections of deck so that they can redo it.
I think also people have to remember, if you have a metal safety fence around a pool and it's within 5 feet of the pool, it has to be bonded too.
Yeah, right. The metal screen enclosures, a lot of those in the southern states, Florida especially, those screen enclosures have to be bonded. A lot of people don't know, and I'm not sure how many people listening are installing above ground pools, but above ground pools have to be bonded. Mm-hmm. And not only does the pool, but the space around the pool from the pool 3 foot back has to have a bond wire in it, just like a deck around a pool. Even if it's just dirt or grass, there has to be a bond wire down there, just like an in-ground pool has in the deck.
Well, it says for grounding and bonding in the NSC, the 2017, grounding and bonding terminals must be identified for use in wet and corrosive environments and must be listed for direct burial use.
Yeah, the termination points have to be, what you're using has to be designed to withstand, if you will, the elements. We it's been a number of years ago, but one of the towns in Illinois, everything boils down to the local town has jurisdiction. Any incorporated village is who dictates what codes are followed. And this particular town, we build vinyl, fiberglass, and shotcrete pools. And this project was a vinyl lined pool, and it had aluminum coping around the top. The walls are polymer, but it had aluminum coping. So that aluminum coping has to be bonded. Every piece of it has to have a piece of copper wire going to it. And we did what we've done in every other project for decades, in terms of, putting a screw through the coping and a washer and tying the wire to it and continuing on to the next piece, to the ladder anchors, the lights, all the rest of it. And the inspector failed us. And the reason he failed us is the particular code that they were following required that wire be welded essentially to the aluminum. Well, how do you weld copper and aluminum? There's a process for it.
Is there?
And when I talked to our electrician, our electrical contractor, and said, "Hey, we failed the bonding," and he's like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "They said it's got to be," and I can't remember the phrase that was used, but and he's like, "Oh my God, you're kidding me." He said, "Okay, well, yeah, we can do that, but I haven't done that, and I can't tell you how long, and I got to get the supplies for it and all the rest of it." And it was another one of those things that cost us a small amount, that we hadn't planned on, and delayed things. Literally every wire had to be basically welded to the aluminum coping. Now, since then, within a couple of years of that, the particular electrical inspector in that town, who was the only inspector in the town, and that's why he required it, retired, and they did away with requiring the coping to be welded to the copper bonding wire. But weird things that sometimes you run into.
I think when it comes to people need to understand also electrical code for when they go to older pools, because you can have a pool that's so old that the light junction box is in the deck.
Yes.
And there are ways around it, but ultimately you do need to bring that up to code if you are going to mess with that light.
Yeah. It was accepted a long time ago, and there are potting compounds and things that can be done, but ultimately those flush deck boxes. What does the code what does the code say as far as deck box elevations now, Kel? Do you remember?
From my understanding, it needs to be 12 inches above grade.
On a light junction box, the code, and I'm trying to find it right here, but I am pretty sure what it says is it needs to be either 8 inches above the highest water possible elevation in the pool. The bottom of the box is 8 inches above that, or 4 inches above grade, whichever is greater. So, okay. I have seen certain light manufacturers, especially in recent years, with what I'll say are nicheless LED lights, that the manufacturer's specifications indicate things like 12 inches or even 18 inches. I just ran into one the other day, and that surprised me, knowing, what I know about the NEC codes, that the manufacturer says it needs to be higher than that. So, not only do we have codes we've got to be concerned with, but we certainly need to be paying attention to the manufacturer. And in any of those types of scenarios where there's a contradiction, you have to look at the one that is going to be, I guess, erring on the side of caution and go with that. So if the manufacturer says it needs to be a foot above, but NEC says 8 inches above water, you're going to put it a foot above.
Kelly and Dan will be right back after these messages.
Have you heard there is a group of pool service professionals nationwide that are here to help grow and protect your business? The Independent Pool and Spa Service Association, known as IPSA, is here to help you. By joining the largest trade organization created by and for pool and spa service techs, you gain access to industry networking opportunities, exclusive educational offerings, IPSA's Tech for Tech route coverage, and more. So be independent, supported, and part of a professional community. Go to ipssa.com to learn how to be a member of IPSA today.
In some of the towns that we build in, to apply for permits, we have to provide the owners or installation manuals for everything going in the backyard.
Yeah.
And we have to provide multiple copies of it. Usually it's 3 copies.
Okay.
And the reason for that is they hand that off to the inspectors going out there. And if the inspector spends the time to go through those manuals and you put the box 8 inches above the highest water level in the pool, but the manual says it needs to be 18 inches, and he read that, he's going to fail you.
Yeah.
And I don't know the reason behind this 18-inch, but I there are people a lot smarter than me than in a lot of places in the world.
You'll find this funny. I had a pool that it was a much older pool, and I got it for service, and I went and I was just like checking everything out, and they originally had one of the junction boxes that are flush with a brass plate, flush with the deck, but the homeowner prior to the new one moving in modified it. What he did was he took GFI, I don't know what it's called, but it's like a plug. You have the on and off, and you plug it in. Well, he attached the wires from the light to this plug so that he could plug his lights in, his pool lights in.
Cool.
I was just like, that's not up to code. I'm like, don't ever use that.
Yeah. I see a lot of crazy things out there, and especially in the world of social media today and Facebook and all of that, whether it's homeowners or sometimes, unfortunately, even professionals that feel that things they're doing are good. One thing I see frequently, and it amazes me, is these people that build their own solar heating systems for the pool.
Yes.
And they do it by running black polyethylene tubing, and sometimes it's coils, sometimes they build these elaborate boxes that almost look like little garden kind of boxes that are sitting up off the side of the deck on an angle
to warm their water.
Yeah. But the way they move the water through it is by dropping a sump pump in the pool. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this. They put a sump pump in the pool and plug it into an extension cord, because the sump pump's got a 6-foot cord on it, and they have this thing running through here, circulating the water to heat it up.
I had a customer who did that. So the way their setup was, so they had the sump pump that they put like on the first or second step, and then they would attach like a garden hose size, but it was all black, and they would lay it over their deck and have it then go back in the water. And they swore by it. They're like, it keeps it warm.
Right. And, the the aspect of that, well, we've got a couple of problems with that. One, you're never supposed to have an extension cord by a swimming pool, ever. That's the reason that automatic cover pumps have 25-foot cords on them. That's also the reason why the NEC code actually calls for an outlet to be located within a certain distance of the pool.
Yeah.
So that they're reducing the potential of an extension cord ever being needed by the pool. That's actually the reason that code is written that way.
Isn't it? It's supposed to be within 5 feet.
I think it's got to be between. It's either 5 and 20 or 6 and 20, but something like that. Like somewhere between 5 feet. Now I got to find that one too. 5 feet. But for sure, 6 feet works. So if look up the code and know it if we don't find it here before the episode's over. But it's required when a pool is built that there is one outlet.
6 feet.
6 feet to
With,
a maximum of 20.
Receptacles must not be located less than 6 feet from the water.
Yeah.
Receptacle location. That's what it is. Receptacles aren't permitted to be located less than 6 feet from the inside walls of whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, but it is required that there's one within
20 feet.
That 6 to 20 feet distance.
Yep.
That there's an outlet available for whatever it may be needed for. But back to the point of these sump pumps in the pool and that we talked. Maybe we didn't. Maybe we're going to. I know we talk about it in our chat group with the talking pools all the time about VGB stuff.
Yes.
Is that sump pump VGB?
No.
Nope, not at all.
That was the first thing that came to my mind was that hair going in the bottom.
Hair going in the bottom of that pump. That's whether it's on the top step or 3 foot down, it doesn't matter. It still has the potential of someone getting sucked into it and ending up in a bad position.
Having it, you will get electrocuted and you will drown because your hair got sucked in.
Yeah, what a way to go. Ouch. That's
like
I can't even imagine. Yeah, can't even imagine. And it happens, unfortunately, and that's the reason why we've got codes to tell us otherwise. So don't put makeshift solar and blah 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 in your pool. I saw one guy in one of the homeowner groups, his boxes he built with these coils of pipe was sitting right next to his pool equipment because he didn't want to see it poolside. So he had 2 black pipes that ran from his sump pump to the box and from the box back to the pool. And in the group, I commented, I said, you can't do this, it's bad. And he says, I always unplug that pump before we go swim, so it's never a problem. Yeah, okay, until you don't. Or until somebody else doesn't, or whatever the case is.
I find that is all just tacky looking.
Right.
Like on these old school pools where they don't have cleaner lines, and so you then run,
hoses over the deck.
Hoses or pipes. Like I think that's tacky looking, but oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, and there are also, as far as pipes over the deck, there are codes, not NEC, but there are codes against doing that because they're tripping hazards.
Yeah.
So, and I know, back in the day, Polaris had an over-the-deck kit. So if you were putting one of their booster pump cleaners in, they sold a weighted deck box, it was called, that you could set poolside with a garden hose running over to your booster pump at the equipment.
I've seen those.
But how that didn't get flagged because of this tripping hazard thing. I think it was the same deal where, when the pool's in use, it's out of the way because you pull the pool cleaner out with that deck box and the garden hose and you put it all off. So it's not a tripping hazard, but tripping hazards.
People keep them there and don't move them. But hey, it's a residential. No one's going to look at it.
Yeah. And that's often what happens. But at any rate, no.
I did have the first time I ever learned this, went to do a pool inspection. They had the deck light. I was like, yeah, that has to be brought up to code. Oh, no, it doesn't. It already meets code. I'm like, okay, why do you say it meets code? And he said, I put a low voltage light in there.
Mhm.
So it's only 12 volts.
Okay.
And I'm like, well, what do you have to show me to prove that? Because when I'm looking at it, you couldn't tell the difference.
Mhm.
So from my understanding, that is one way of going around it. Do I prefer that method? No.
Yeah.
If it's me, I'm not going to do that.
When we build, we only install low voltage lighting in the
I
pool.
do too.
And when in the service end of things, we will replace high voltage lights with high voltage lights, of course, verifying that the ground, the bond, the GFI are all intact and functioning and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot more concern with that for me than a 12 volt light is. But there's so many things that can go wrong in a backyard. To me, from the standpoint of building, it doesn't cost me that much more to put 12 volt lights in as opposed to 120 volt. We're running bigger wire to the junction box. We're putting transformers in and this kind of stuff. But it's we're building pools today that are six figures. How much is a transformer or a couple of transformers?
One's like $300. If you buy Hayward, if it's a J&J, it's like 140.
Right. So for us, it's really just a no-brainer. Always has been low voltages, and for in the market that we're in, Cook County, which is a county that Chicago is in, for the longest time would not allow high voltage underwater lights in pools.
Oh, wow. I
They
like
just
that.
wouldn't. Right. At the same token, they wouldn't allow any kind of PVC piping either. Everything had to be copper. But there are reasons for that go into plumbers unions and stuff like that.
I stopped putting in high voltage lights, even on a replacement, I'll do it on commercial because the company I work for, or I do work for, they want that. It's like, whatever, it's on you. But when I go into a backyard to replace lights, I will only do low voltage lighting. And it's for safety reasons. And I explain that to the customer. And when I'm done talking, then they understand. They're like, I feel exactly the same. And they don't mind that extra cost for that initial time.
One of the nice things in the last decade, I'll say, a little bit less, but certainly last 5 to 7 years, is the use of LED lights. We talked last episode about wires, wire sizes, things like that, and we talked about amperage. So the mathematical aspect of amperage is determined by the wattage a device draws divided by the voltage supplied to it. So if those of you that tuned in last episode, we talked a lot about 12 gauge wire can handle 20 amps. In conventional non-LED low voltage lighting, if we had 12 volt lights, they were usually 300 watt bulbs.
Yeah.
Well, if you do the math on that, watts divided by volts, that 300 watts divided by 12 volts means that wire is drawing 25 amps through it.
Yeah.
If it's drawing 25 amps, that exceeds what 12 gauge wire can carry. So you have to go to 10 gauge wire. Okay. So when you walk into a backyard that has conventional high voltage lighting, that high voltage 300 watt bulb in the old style non-LED stuff divided by 120 volts means that you've got somewhere around 2.5 amps. Everybody was running 12 gauge wire to the junction box for that. So if you walk in that backyard and you want to take that high voltage light out that's fed on the branch circuit with 12 gauge wire only capable of 20 amps at max, and you want to put a low voltage light in, prior to LEDs, you would have to pull all of the wire feeding the junction box out and pull 10 gauge wire through so that your 12 volt light wouldn't burn up that 12 gauge wire. Anyway, back to LEDs. LEDs don't draw anywhere near the amperage to provide the same lumens that the old conventional lights do.
Yeah, I believe the ones that I install, they're maybe 6 amps each.
Yeah, right. So today we can take that same situation, put a transformer over by the power source at the equipment pad, leave the 12 gauge wire feeding out to the junction box, pull our new 12 volt LED light through,
Yeah.
and the whole circuit is still designed within all the parameters of everything in between. So it's kind of a cool thing how technology has brought us benefits in a lot of different ways. So we can make pools safer for people by getting the high voltage out of the pool, and we don't have to have them spend quite as much money. And in some cases, if you're dealing with a 30-year-old pool, you may not be able to pull that old 12 gauge wire out to feed. It's not gonna do it. So having
then you
the
have
ability
to adapt it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
As
think
I'm talking,
my dad said he's had one light he could not pull. No matter what he did, he could not pull it.
yeah, we've run into a few, especially when you're talking about the deck boxes, the flush deck boxes, real common in our area. Old poured concrete pools in the area that a couple of different builders built very comparable to one another. They would come out of the light niche in the back with literally one of those LB boxes we mentioned, the pull elbows, and go straight up and put it into the right underneath the diving board in front of the base on the diving board. So the junction box isn't even a foot behind the pool. It's literally, maybe it's a foot behind the pool, but you can't get those out. And the lights installed back in the day were Frost, was the manufacturer, Frost lights. Well, those cords on those things, when they were brand new, were bigger than your thumb in diameter. And over time, they absorb water and swell, and they just wedge themselves in there and then put a 90-degree elbow on the thing besides, buried in the ground, and forget it. You're not getting that thing out of there. It's not coming. So what do? We run into that. What do? We pull the light out as far as we can. We cut the wire and wire nut it into a new one and tuck that wire nut back in the niche, right?
Yeah.
No, we don't. You can
I
never.
see people that do that.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not saying I do, but
no. I know. I'm being facetious, but we've seen that done. But the NEC code says we cannot do that. You cannot have a splice underwater in a conduit in a niche. You can't splice that ever.
No,
NEC
when it comes to the lights, you have to keep that cord connected in case non-interrupted.
Yeah.
The only part that you can do anything to is where you cut it to connect it to power at the junction box.
Right. And something else too, as we say junction box, how often have you seen I'll say a bell box used as a junction box? You know what I'm referring to as a bell box, just your outdoor box that you would see an outlet standing up out of the ground in. Aluminum squared off rectangular box.
I really don't see that. I've seen it where there may be a square box plug there, but on top it's always been an actual junction box.
So we run into a lot of things done, and we see builders in our area today doing this as well. The NEC code requires that the junction box for a light be a junction box that is specifically listed for that purpose.
Right.
And you're not allowed to, if it's an indoor pool, it's not uncommon that builders will run the conduit from the lights up into the wall, where they'll put a standard, 1900 box in the wall and run the conduit feed from there back to the source. And that's against NEC code. It's because it's not a box that's listed for use as a swimming pool light junction box.
The closest thing I've seen to anything like that is but it is low voltage lighting, where they pull the light all the way to the transformer and it goes into the transformer.
And that's okay. The main thing they're looking for with that, if those who have never really looked, open up the next time you get a chance a bell box or a junction box for a light. Sorry, there's a grounding terminal in that box, and that's the biggest thing that they're looking for.
Well, because the light has to be grounded from the behind the niche, the back of it, all the way up. Bonded. Okay.
Right.
Bonded from the back of the niche all the way up to that junction box.
Right. And then that bond wire continues on through the rest of the bonding grid back to the equipment pad.
Well, no, this is always a solid, not solid, but it's never the ones I see are never a bare wire. It's green, and it's probably about a 6 gauge wire that just goes from the light to that. Is that the same thing?
It is. It's a bond, even though they're using a green wire. So NEC code currently and for many years requires the bond wire be a bare number 8 wire. I'm almost certain that it used to, and even if it didn't, local codes said it was okay to use a stranded 10 gauge, no, 6 gauge. Let me think about this. 6 gauge, I think it was, stranded 6 gauge green wire for the bonding wire.
Okay.
So a stranded 6 or a solid 8 is what used to be acceptable, where today it's solid 8. So you will see bond wires at equipment pads. Even you'll see where it's not real easy to run a stranded wire that you have to try to strip and all the rest of it and slide through the bonding lugs from a pump through a heater through a whatever at the equipment pad. But there are some that have been done. But that is a bond wire.
Kelly and Dan will return next week with the second half of this episode on the National Electric Code. Until then, don't do anything at the pool you are not qualified to do. You may end up killing someone.